Everybody good with being recorded? Especially
fine. Yeah.
Yes, delightful. So yay! Thank you all for coming, and thank you so much to Jenny and all of the Ravenswing Magical Co-op folk in Selwood, Portland, Oregon for joining. My name is Kate Mura, and y'all are here or watching a Rebels and Priestesses, a conversation with creators, and the creators being myself, Kate Mura, Murphy Ruckman, Shareen Jacobs, on Zoom, Key Ridenour-Starnes, and the author of Women of the Golden Dawn, Rebels and Priestesses, Mary K. Greer. This is an official part of the Literary Arts Portland Book Festival Cover to Cover program. And Literary Arts is a nonprofit literary center with the mission to engage readers, support writers, and inspire the next generation with great literature. We hope to see everyone at the Portland Book Festival Saturday, November 4th at the Portland Art Museum and neighboring venues, which is Ravenswing doing anything in the in the official book festival on Saturday for us to plug?
No, just this.
Delightful. Cool. More information with the full schedule and purchase festival passes is at pdxbookfest.org. And now I am done saying all of the things that we had to say being a part of the official Cover to Cover program. So yay. So the four of us, when we were working on turning Women of the Golden Dawn, Rebels and Priestesses into a performance piece, got into an opening habit of doing a brief check-in and answering a fun, silly question. And I was wondering if we wanted to start that way here. Sure. Yeah. All right. Who would like to begin?
Busy thinking of fun, silly question. What
what's
fun,
the question?
fun,
What's the
question?
Favorite Halloween costume that you saw this year?
Oh, that's actually that might be a difficult one.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm shady, so I actually do have an answer to that one.
All right, start us off, Shareen.
So check in. I am excited to be here. I've seen the Portland Book Festival for several years. It's a really amazing event. I never thought I would get to be a part of it, so that's really cool. I'm having a great day today, so that is my check-in. And my favorite shady Halloween costume, it's kind of gross, but it's the Parisian bed bugs. And two people dressed up as the bed bugs that Paris is having an infestation of. And I thought that was funny. So
What did they look like?
I mean, it was like these two people, it was a photo I saw on TikTok, but these two people, they almost kind of look like roaches, but like they were sitting on a bed. That's how they had it set up. And I was like, wow, that's shady, y'all, but well done.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Right?
All right. Hi, I'm Megan. I am also very excited to be here and be a part of the book festival and be at Ravenswing because I love it here. To be back with the Rebels and Priestesses. Yeah, well fed, body's doing good. Favorite Halloween costume. One that just made me go, oh, was some parent had put their two twins in front and back of the Slinky dog from Toy Story.
Oh,
and it was just absolutely adorable, you know, because it's got the feet and one has the head sticking out, and then there's the Slinky soft colored Slinky covered, and then someone gets to be the butt of the dog. But that was really impressive. And just honorable mention to the 13 Wednesday characters that I saw on Halloween. Like everybody,
Wow.
so many people dressed as Wednesday. I was
Yes.
like, all right, welcome.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't see one Wednesday costume. Yikes.
Checked it.
My name is Kate Mura, she, her. I am also doing well today, and I am tentatively hopeful because my bus seems to be back working properly. It is a saga I will bore nobody here with. And the Halloween costume that I got the most confused by and then went, oh, I very much thought that one of my friends and his partner came as a like 80s revision of Elvis and someone that had a really fun hair like sparkly doodad on it. And then I realized that no, in fact, they were Ken and Barbie, and the big sparkly K did not, in fact, have anything to do with Elvis and everything to do with Ken. And then I went, oh, that makes so much more sense than what my brain thought. Oh, well.
Yay.
Checked it.
Ooh.
I'll jump in. I am also doing well. It's been a whirlwind of a couple of days, but it's really exciting to be in November now, I would say. So I have an honorable mention and then a favorite Halloween costume that I saw. So the honorable mention is there were two folks who dressed up as lantern flies, a la the bed bugs of Paris. But like if folks aren't familiar, lantern flies are an invasive species on the eastern coast, and there are actual like bulletins and stuff out for you to like kill on site because they destroy natural habitat and native species. Wow. So I thought that was very funny because the caption was the scariest Halloween costume you'll see. But I would say my top costume that I saw, it was on Instagram. It was a Guy Fieri fairy. So it was someone who was dressed as Guy Fieri, but they were also a fairy. And so they had like his like iconic flame button down, but it was a dress, and then his like whole visage, but then fairy wings. It was
Oh my God,
it was peak.
so
It was very good.
That's fantastic. I love that.
And that's me checked.
So you want me to tell mine?
Yes, please.
Oh, actually, on my street, there were a couple of parties and open houses and, kind of ghost setups. So we had more people than I've ever seen ever on our block. And I went through $50 worth of candy in less than an hour and a half. There's so many people I can't even begin to remember, except this one kid that was playing among all the people. I think the whole elementary school was invited across the street to come. And he had a blow-up dragon that was pretty big size, like a small, tiny pony size. And so it was like he was riding on top of it with little legs coming over the sides, but actually it was made so that his legs could go through and that he was walking on the bottom. So it actually looked like he was riding this blow up dinosaur and having a pretty good time with it. It was fun. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, there are tons and tons of fairy princesses with sparkly wings all lit up, and the parents were all dressed up too. So, but I can't even begin to think of any one of them there were just so many. It was like I was overwhelmed.
We had, I think I counted like 16 trick-or-treaters at our place yesterday. I may have missed some because we had friends over and a bonfire in the back, but it was the first time that I wasn't working on Halloween and was actually able to be home with a fire and hand out candy to small children. It was
Yeah,
delightful.
Awesome.
it was fun.
Mary, I'm curious, and I realize this isn't actually one of the necessarily questions that were listed on the cover to cover page, but I'm curious, like, why did you want to write this book in the first place? Because I'm so grateful you did.
Yeah. I just became fascinated by the women one by one as I, read and heard about them. And the Golden Dawn, it wasn't actually the very first magical organization for men and women to work together, but it was the first one that made any kind of an impact, and definitely different than any of the other magical organizations, the majority of which were men only. So the fact that they not only could work together as equals, but also had very important, significant roles in the history of the Golden Dawn, this magical organization, just intrigued me, and I wanted to know more. Also, when in college, I was an English major, and so I was very familiar with William Butler Yeats, who was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. But Maud Gonne was somebody he wrote most of his love poetry to, or at least a good segment of it. And she was one of the women who was a member of the Golden Dawn. And so that intrigued me first because I knew a little something about her, and it was a chance to know more. And then Moina Mathers, who was married to the founder, oh my gosh, they said at some point that she had kind of channeled some of the ritual material, as well as being an artist. And so she was in charge of a lot of the decoration of it, but very little written about her. And her magical name was the equivalent of leaving no vestiges, no footsteps behind. And so, oh, nobody is, can I find out anything more about her? And I was lucky enough there wasn't a lot of information, but I did have some contact with distant relatives of hers, because she didn't have any children of her own. I was actually able to share things with them that they didn't know about. I was hoping that they maybe had a diary somewhere or something. No luck. And then the other two, just as I was studying, they became more and more intriguing. So it was my desire to know more about this. Also, I had been teaching several times a course in college on women's biography and autobiography. So this was my chance to do my part.
Cool. Key, any chance you have the because after we've used a lot of material like springboarding from your book, and one of the first ones was all of the letters. Key, you want to do you happen to have the book of Yeats and Maud's letters anywhere nearby? Maybe we could do a little bibliomancy, see what they want to say.
That would be cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
so as part of the process, we got this book, The Gone Yeats Letters, from 1893 to 1938, and a majority of them are Yeats letters to Maud, just because a lot of her letters were lost.
Yeah.
But it is a hefty a lot of letters. But yeah, let's see.
Raised eyebrow.
Oh yes. So a majority of them are Yates to Maud, but of course the one I landed on was Maud to Yates.
Hey.
Thank you.
Good.
This is letter 134, written 13 Rue de Passy on February 12th, 1904.
Okay.
Shall I just read the letter?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
All right. My dear Willie, this is the first letter that I have been allowed to write, and I waited to thank you for 3 letters till I was able to write it myself. I was very ill for a couple of months before my baby was born, and I did not write to any of my friends as I didn't want to make them anxious. I am very well now, only rather weak, and I hope next week I will be able to get up. The baby is a treasure, and of course, I imagine all sorts of wonderful things for his future. Your last letter was such a nice letter. Thank you so much for it. The others I understood very well, and though on 1 or 2 things we don't think quite the same, and I think you have altered your views in national art, you think I have in some way changed mine. It is possible that both of us have unconsciously modified our opinions. Still, I believe we shall be able to work together for Ireland just the same as in the past. I knew well that you gave the scenarios to Dr. Hyde for his plays and worked him up to write them. I knew well that you gave the scenario to Dr. Hyde for his plays and worked him up to write to them too. And it is exactly that last that seemed to show me the difficulty of producing purely national and original work when one is influenced by foreign schools and knows too much of cosmopolitan art and literature. You get a purely Irish you get a purely Irish conception of a play, and as you work it out, it becomes less and less Irish. I have noticed this more than once in the work of yours that you have read me in its various stages of development. You give an Irish scenario to Hyde, and he who has been but little out of Ireland is influenced to a much lesser degree than by the foreign schools. We'll work it out in a way which makes it more Irish and more in affinity with the thought of the nation for whom it is written. And yet I know well that Douglas Hyde cannot in any way compare with you as a writer. Kathleen na Houlihan is more national than anything Hyde has ever written, but it was written rapidly as it came to you direct from the life forces of Ireland. You hardly changed or altered a word of that play from your first dream conception of it. I wonder if I am only making things worse by writing this, or whether this will make you see a little what I tried to express in the letter you did not like. And in the article of mine, you refer to in the UI. I did not mean to say anything to pain you, and I would be very, very sorry if I thought there was any serious misunderstanding between us. There would not be if we could talk things over, but I find it hard to express my thoughts in writing. I am glad your tour is such a success. I look forward to hearing it all when you come home. As soon as I am well, I am going to Dublin for a few months as my husband has to go to America and my work in Ireland has been rather neglected for the last 6 months. With a very good wishes for your tour and a good journey home, always your friend, Maud Gone McBride.
Yeah.
P.S. The war news is very exciting. It is the beginning of the Great War.
Almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And actually, when I wrote my book, many of these letters were not available. So that, I'll check the date of publication of that because I don't remember having that letter at all. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of them were unknown at the time. They were still, a lot of things have been kept within families and different people without coming out. So. Yeah, the date of publication of that book.
Yeah, it was published in 1992, 1993. 1992 internationally, 1993 in
Oh,
America,
because
in the
that's,
US.
yeah, that's when I was still writing the book. Let me see, 89, 90, 91. Yeah, it came out in, yeah, right around,
Mhm.
let's see, I always forget the date. Yeah, it came out in 95, but I don't remember reading that particular letter. Oh, I did manage to read a lot of Yeats's stuff and Annie Horniman's at the National Library of Ireland. So I did spend time both at the British Library and the National and in Ireland in their reading rooms, which you have to have special passes for.
Yeah.
You have to go through, applying to them to be able to sit there and hold them in your hands. And you could only take notes with a pencil on a piece of paper. You couldn't bring any pens in.
Mhm.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah,
I so I had the idea to turn this book into a performance piece after I read it in 2017 or 2018, right before I met you for the first time, Mary, at Northwest
Mhm.
Tarot Symposium, where I it's like, would you be okay? We turned this into a performance piece.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went to and I was performing in England the following summer, and I had time in London, and so I went to the Horniman Museum and I looked around trying to find pictures or like anything talking about Annie at all, and I only found one picture when she was like 11 years old.
Uh-huh.
Like that's it. That, I mean, I know the museum was, created by her father and all of the things that he gathered, right, in ways that we do not know all of how he gathered them. But I was so amazed that there was like nothing there about Annie, even though her contributions to magic and theater were so flippin' huge. And at least for me, that's part of the reason why creating
Yeah.
Rebels and Priestesses is important, to get their contributions out there.
And part of it was the family issue because when her father remarried a woman younger than her, she was very much opposed to that and protested and stopped speaking to her father and ended up with kind of a little bit of a rocky relationship with her brother that she had been close to because he stayed, in connection with the father. At least that's what I remember from the story. Yeah. So, yeah, they were kind of at different logger ends, and I don't think they approved at all of her magical connections.
Mhm.
Yeah. I know, I went there too, and but it was amazing to see, like, there were all these musical instruments from around the world. Her father and grandfather were tea merchants, and so in their travels and making connections with all these different tea plantations and all these islands all over the place, they brought things back, which is the basis of the collection. And there were costumes, and I would imagine her wearing those different costumes as a child. I don't know if her family would let her or not, but were they allowed to play with the musical instruments from all these different countries and different magical things? The old museum, which I don't know if you went when it was the older museum, it was kind of like a Victorian museum, just chock full of stuff everywhere.
It was definitely very full when I was there. I was there the summer of 2019.
Yeah,
So
that's
it was,
fairly recent.
yeah, it was quite recent. It was definitely very full. I vaguely remember being told that things had expanded, like part of the exhibits that were there were from the original museum, and there had been like wings and things added on, or buildings, maybe even buildings added on. I don't don't actually remember. Obviously need to go back. I had hoped to chat with the librarian while I was there, but the library was closed the day I went. So for my co-conspirators, I'm curious, why did y'all want to jump in on this endeavor?
Oh, we're all part of a Fuse Theater Ensemble, which is a collection of various artists around the Portland area. And it was through that I think you had said, is anybody interested? And I went, oh, it's magic and it's theater and it's women and it's history. Yes, this is something I'm interested in. All of those. Let's do all of those. Though I realized there was so much I didn't know. So that was another piece of knowing more of the history, learning more of the history, and finding out more of the roots of these women. Because I, like you, Mary, I knew more about Yeats and Shaw, theater major, like lots of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But hadn't heard as much about Annie, hadn't heard much about Florence or all of that. It's like, oh, these were major influencers on all of these pieces. How have I not delved deeper into these women's stories? So when you said, yeah, would anyone be interested? I went, me, pick me. Stuff. And then developed further there.
Yeah, I wrote it for people just like you.
You knew we would be coming.
I don't know that my reasons were as fully fleshed out as all of that. I think there was a call of, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, why not? Seems interesting enough. I have heard of many of the names involved. I've heard of Yeats, heard of Shaw, have heard of the Golden Dawn, but didn't have much working knowledge of any of these people, or how they're connected or why I would care. But I was like, oh, that sounds like an interesting project. I'll help.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then we all got the book
Right.
and started making
And got it
notes.
attached.
And then
Oh,
underlining and highlighting and deep diving and having our charts ready.
Oh my God.
Charts, like we went like
We went
full
full on in.
on in. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
What a rich way to start, and then to just find all the rabbit holes.
We didn't even in the most recent iteration of Rebels and Priestesses in the Atelier Festival, we didn't even really dive into all of the astrology, because one of our, was it our first team building? Like team building
in
thing?
person, February, March. First in-person meeting,
was getting all of our charts read collectively, and then juxtaposing our charts with the charts that you created for each of the women in the book. And
wonderful. Yeah.
Really cool.
So good.
Yeah, I mean, seeing the connections that are there through astrology gives deeper meaning to me to both their experiences, and I imagine your all's experience, where you see how the energies are intertwining.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say anything about that?
There was so much, like hours. We were at the table with Thomas for hours. Seeing the similarities and differences of the women at the time, and the struggles that they were going through personally, but how they met at the time, in a time of revolution and change. And then hearing about our individual charts and where we are at our time, and what our strengths and weaknesses and what we were bringing to our group. And there were lessons from Lilith and Saturn that kept coming up, and how those were bringing the shadow into the light for these 4 women and for the 4 of us. and seeing those parallels and reflections coming through. I have pages of notes somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't think I brought those with me.
I was thinking that actually, if anybody has access, Key might have access to some of the notes that we had made. I remember that one of the things that I was struck by was something in my chart, and I don't remember with whom. Maybe it is in those notes. If not, it is in one of my notebooks somewhere. My wherever and however my Pluto was also very similar to one of the other women's, but I don't remember more. I don't remember more than that.
Yeah, I do remember feeling that a lot of parallels between each of us and each of them as well.
Yeah, and just to verbalize it, I put in the chat as well, but the focus was on Pluto and Lilith, and I'm sure Saturn was
thank
also
you.
big as
Yes,
well,
and
but
Lilith.
I was
those
thinking-
were the two.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was thinking Saturn Returns, which was a
Oh.
different.
Because that happened a lot as well.
That was a different thing, but yes, Pluto and Lilith. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was definitely intrigued by the Saturn returns that were happening for people back then. Yeah. Important turning points in people's lives.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. I call those years the volcano years, personally, having been through that.
Yeah.
And to read more about that in these women, I went, I totally get it. I feel ya. Sometimes you got to break stuff down in order to build up and grow new. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then the connection of Saturn and Pluto is also that they were not only breaking things down for themselves, but it was a generational thing that they were accomplishing by it. And maybe you all are doing that too now.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope that we are helping foster collective remembering in just another
Oh,
step.
that's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the idea that we are lineages. I know in many of the women's groups I've been in, there's been a strong sense that we were priestesses together a long, long ago. And, we often have said it privately to one or two people, and then it turns out that everybody else was saying it to other people, that, that kind of thing. So this, there's a lot of work being done in tarot now with working with the ancestors. This is something even more intimate than that to me. The ancestors are family, but this is like this women's lineage, magical women's lineage that I think is that we come together for particular reasons. Yeah.
What were you about to say?
I was going to ask Key about their joining into the project.
Yeah, I think similarly, because this was before I was part of Fuse, that I joined on. I think Kate was just like, hey, I have this project in mind. I have this idea in mind, and it's ritual theater. Would you be interested? And I think we actually started talking about it after another ritual theater piece that I had done. I don't remember if you had seen it, but I think we were already talking about ritual theater, because I did one at Portland Playhouse for Joy Comes in the Morning. That was ritual theater, and that also is just my I would say focus in a lot of my work is like ritual theater, calling forth and calling back at the same time with a collective group of people, and theater as medicine. And so like all of these things kind of together, in addition to like, ooh, I don't know, even though I have been dabbling, I would say, in witchcraft for a while, I don't know a lot about the I would say Golden Dawn lineage, and that was another thing that I was interested in. Like also the when we got our charts read, that was the first time that I had actually had my chart read. Like I knew what my big three were, and that was pretty much it, and I didn't really understand the context of the big three, and now I'm like, oh, that makes more sense, and that makes more sense, and it's kind of like this. So I think it was also, I was like, ooh, I get to work with 3 amazing other witches. Like that sounds really cool on a theater piece. And that's, I just jumped in. And then when I got the book, my dramaturgy brain, because I do a lot of things in theater, but like dramaturgy is the thing that I always kind of connect myself back to. And so as soon as I got the book, I was like, ooh, history and narrative and back things and like all of these things. So my dramaturgy brain was like, yes, let's make a thing. Yeah, that's how I jumped in.
Well,
I love
I love the way you all turned it into an autobiographical thing, because I've always loved autobiography more than biography. We sometimes learn more in biography because biographers love to reveal all the sticky little things. And when somebody writes about their own story, they lie. They lie, but that's part of who they are.
Yeah.
It's more real than the people who are revealing the absolute facts. So the fact that you all did it as autobiography of becoming those women was just so powerful to me. I just can't tell you how wonderful that was to experience it, as well as, of course, the ritual thing, which, yeah, me. I've been through 2 initiations in the Golden Dawn, but it was having to drive 3 hours each way, and I just couldn't keep it up. I would have, but my real practice, which I think you touched on even more, is what I call California eclectic goddess spirituality. Yeah. So or we could say West Coast.
No, I'm
And,
originally from California, so I'm catching your vibe. For
yeah,
sure.
we can draw from any tradition we want and any combination we want, and do what feels right to us. And I think you brought that in, even though you honored and respected the Golden Dawn tradition, but did it in the way that I would call that, West Coast spirituality, eclectic, pulling in, what feels right and what works for the images that you were creating, the what I was calling the autobiography of speaking for these women. Yeah.
Key. I don't want to pull up the chat on my computer because then it's going to do funky things on the screen, but I see like 13 things in the chat, and 13 just is such a lovely magical number that I figured I would touch base and see if there are any questions in the chat for to lift up.
We have a curiosity. I have no experience adapting nonfiction works for the stage, but I'm definitely looking to get into it. How did you find it similar and different to adapting fiction?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I have adapted fiction, actually, because to start things off as the person who seeded this initial idea, I was captivated. To use your words, Mary, I was captivated by the autobiography, and overwhelmed at the same time, because I've been creating theater for 40 years now.
Yes. Nice round number.
And I was like, well, do they each get their solo show? Is it an ensemble piece? Is it one big solo show where one person does all of the women and the characters? Do any of the men want to be there? Like, and I was I sat in my sense of overwhelm and dreaming of possibilities for a good year plus. And so for me, there was more of the difference was less about changing, adapting works of fiction rather than nonfiction, because a lot of the devised and original work that I have done is autobiographical. But for me, it was more of really deciding whether these women's stories were going to be best served by being a solo show, and whether that's each of them getting their own solo show or one person creating all of the parts, or if Annie, Florence, Maud, and Moyna's stories were going to be better served by being creative and created in a collective.
Yeah.
And it took a little while and some meditation and tarot and reflection, but the answer came through very clear of collaboration. And that's when I reached out to these four. So yeah, what about y'all? Who the creating biography versus fiction?
The thing that really sticks out for me is with fiction, there's an existing story with beginning, middle, end, but life is messy and has lots of beginnings and middles and ends, and it is not so easily cut and dry. So when adapting fiction, like I grew up doing children's theater, and it's a lot of take a children's book, turn it into a show. So the story exists already. The question is, like, how do you develop, and how does that particular character show a little more on stage as opposed to just one line in a book? Whereas this, it was the reverse. There is so much material about these women's lives. And I love the way that Mary has organized the book in the seasons of these women, you know, spring, summer, fall, and winter, from birth to death, individual stories, how they mesh, how they separate, how they eventually go on to their own. Like, there are so many story threads in this book that the bigger piece was, okay, now that we've decided we're all here, now do we each, you know, take one woman to focus on and tell that story, or do we all tell a little bit of all the story, or just one piece, one part of the, like, there. So for this piece, adapting it to the theater was, what story threads do you pick from? Because there's so much material to use, whereas fiction to a stage play, the beginning, middle, and end is kind of already created. You just have to flesh it out a little more.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say about that.
I've never adapted anything. I've only done one other devised piece, and it was based on a book, but not adapted, really. It wasn't adapted. It's different. But I would agree with you that, like, when you're talking fiction, you have a story. This is the story. You've got your dialogue, or however your characters are set. You know who's in it, you know who's not, you know where you're going with it, you know what it's supposed to look like. And now it's a matter of, how do you show rather than tell? When you're doing nonfiction, at least the problem, or at least what I've seen of adapting this specific work, is one, figuring out what story do I want to tell? Whereas when you're dealing with fiction, you have your story told. What story am I trying to tell? And so then you have to pull from that and figure out what parts go with the story, what parts serve the story, what part is part of the story, but we don't need to put this in the story. What things are missing from the story that is not the story, and then how to make that translate into a theatrical type story. And I think that's one of the biggest differences that you'll see with nonfiction versus fiction adaptations.
Wow.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, anything else to add, Keith?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of devising work. It's my main, I would say, mode of theater making at this point, just because of the, like, collaborative way in which, not that the rest of theater isn't collaborative, but there's something about making something that is arising from everyone who is in the process. Yeah. Yeah. So normally generally speaking, what I will do is there's an oracle deck called the Wild Unknown Archetypes that I really like to work with when I am devising, and it is a oracle deck of archetypes, which gives certain narratives. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have a question that arises in a workshop process or in a conversation with folks. We're like, great, we're going to make a piece. I will all kind of gather, I'll pull cards, and we'll either keep them in the order that they arose in, or we'll start kind of playing with the narrative, the potential narrative arcs from the archetypes that have arisen. And that's for just like making a narrative of a fiction thing or adapting something that already has a narrative. So a lot of fairy tales are really fun. Like I've also adapted a lot of fairy tales. It just tends to be one of those devising things. But even in that situation, like pulling specific archetypes and being like, oh, we pulled the mother archetype and we're doing like Hansel and Gretel. Okay, we might want to focus on that mother character in that narrative. For this, we asked cards a lot of questions. I think every time we gathered, we pulled. We did some cartomancy. And it spanned across like the decks that we used in performance. So the Lua Tarot and the archetypes we also used in performance, but we also, there's a deck, the Wild Unknown Alchemy deck as well. And alchemy kept showing up as a kind of through line. And so I would say that there was a lot of conversation around honoring the women. So not necessarily hiding any messy bits because we're very much humanizing them, but also, honoring them as best as we can, and also asking them questions as we went along. There were a lot of like, hey, y'all, how would you best like us to tell your story? How would you best like this to kind of come to an audience? And so I feel like there was a lot more consideration for listening to ancestors and listening to the women. And also we did a lot of like research as well around like other things that were happening in the world during the timeline that we the slice of the long timeline that we kind of focused on, to also give context.
I had to focus
so I
somehow.
Yes. Because I feel like in fiction, you need context. You need context for the show, but a lot of times the context is the audience understanding of what is happening now in the world, even though everyone is interpreting it differently. But in nonfiction, you have that, and then you also have the historical layer on top as well, and just like having a good breadth of historical events that aren't also just like whitewashed events. Like when we were doing research into other things that were happening in the years that we were focusing on, we were like, also what's happening in other parts of the world that aren't the UK, Ireland, what's going on everywhere else. So like really kind of trying to broaden that as well. Yeah.
I found it really interesting in that historical deep dive, how much around the globe was going through revolution and change at that same time. That was huge to me, of like, yes, this story, these women were revolutionary in their little social circle, in their bubble, in their town, state, country, etc. But then to do the historical deep dive and go, oh, actually the Maoris were revolting over in New Zealand, and these folks over in the US, and these folks in the US were having, civil wars over here, and other, even in the huge Asian continent that includes so many countries, same thing, like all over the world in this same end of 18 into the early 1900s, everyone was in this change of shift from old to something new. So I felt like that part was really interesting. So I appreciate your dramaturgy, Kia, that we went into that further, and yeah, that was good.
Yeah, the backstory in much more depth They say that an actor really needs to have the backstory that maybe never is mentioned in the actual work. Yeah, and you did your work.
We have so much material.
You could write another whole play about it, something.
Oh, yeah.
In that time. Yeah.
The next steps are the next steps are creating more dialogue and finding the funding and financing for our dream costume ideas, because I don't know if anyone here watching and listening has seen the musical Six, but we basically want to take that idea of modern Elizabethan mashup and instead have it be modern Victorian Edwardian mashup of all grayscale to honor the Gray Lady.
Yeah. But grants and budgeting and all of that. We're working on that. That's what we're going for.
Exactly. And for anybody who wants to stay abreast of what we are doing, if you go to katemura.com/rebels and priestesses, that is the website that we have created to have all of the things. And I guess at some point we should probably look to see if rebelsandpriestesses.com is available and just have it automatically link. But yeah, so that's how folk can stay up to date.
I'd love to see something that makes connections perhaps with rebels and priestesses of later periods or even earlier ones. Yeah.
Another deep dive. So much material. So much.
Because that was even something that we had talked about when we were talking about specifically for the Atelier Festival, of like how far back do we go, because we were starting to talk about like the beginnings of theater, the beginnings of recorded like ritual, which beginning of time, but like the kind of combination of the two, because a lot of theatrical practices arose out of ritual practices anyway. And so we were like, how far back do we go? Like I pulled up stuff from my theater history class about like the pyramid text, which is text that we have from ancient Egyptian rituals that also have that very theatrical aspect to them as well. And we were like, maybe this is a little bit too far back. We might lose if we're going really from the beginning. But I also would like to, I don't know, weave some more.
Well, Florence Farr did write an Egyptian ritual one-act play. And then she also, with Olivia Shakespeare, wrote another play. So there were two plays that they put on simultaneously, both of them one-act plays. So maybe you could look those up. And it was by Florence Farr and Olivia Shakespeare, who was also an actress of the time. And and then they have been produced in England, in London, and I could put you in touch with some of the people involved in that.
That would be
awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Are there other questions from the chat? Other curiosities?
Not currently, but please, if you have more questions, drop them into the chat. I've just been adding, like, I added Six on Broadway for folks for the context of Six, and I put our the website address as well.
Thank you. And I thought that was a nice comment here. Thank you for such great insight about needing to craft a narrative arc out of the messiness of real human lives. We do have some examples by young women who've done some things on television series of kind of messy lives. But when you think of it in conjunction with ritual and with the priestesses and all the rest, that adds another whole dimension. I often thought about, wouldn't it be exciting to have a book of an anthology of all the things that we've done wrong as magicians and priestesses. How
Oh,
we learn from our mistakes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So put that out there. Anybody that wants to pull together an anthology of those, I can contribute some. Yeah.
Yeah, that's heavy. I'm not sure I'm ready to go there right now. But definitely
Put it
put
in the
that,
notes.
put that in there. Put it in notes. Yep. That is
It is in the
worth-
pot.
Yeah.
It is worth that.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It is in the pot.
Good call.
Mm. Well, we are coming up to the end of our hour together.
Ooh.
And as we started this whole conversation off in the same fashion that we started our rehearsal schedules off, shall we
Sure.
finish?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So we finish in something that's called reinforcements. And this is something that Key and I learned when both of us were teaching staff for Portland Public Schools through Portland Playhouse. And it what it is reinforcing something that you learned, something that went well, something that happened in the course of our time together that you want to lift up for whatever reason. And we just popcorn it whenever someone feels like they know what they want to reinforce, jump on in.
Okay, I'll reinforce curiosity. Because I think it's one of the most, for me, it's one of the most valuable traits a person could have, to keep asking questions, to dig in, to find out the whys, to find out what happened. And I think that's kind of how we ended up where we are right now, is curiosity. We all had a question, we wanted to know more. And so we did the work to dig in and to find out, to find out and look at what we found. So curiosity.
So much good stuff.
I want to reinforce what Key said earlier about crafting stories and ritual theater that cast forward simultaneously while reaching back. My own personal witchcraft practice these days is much more reclaiming centered, and so I love the ancestors and descendants and each of us all being conduits for that magical pass through. And yeah, that's what I want to reinforce.
Related, I want to reinforce storytelling and ancestors. I'm very conscious right now of the veil being thin at this time, and so it seems absolutely appropriate. Yes, there's a book fair, but also we happen to be talking about our ancestors at this particular time, and that's what it's about. And I got into theater because it's about telling human stories to humans, to make them think or feel or just breathe differently, and to take a moment to look at life, themselves or others, in a different way. So storytelling and ancestors, pulling those together. So that's my reinforcement.
I'm also going to reinforce ancestors and descendants, that kind of like both going in all of the directions at once, and kind of having the perception from here and now. And I want to reinforce the Pluto and Lilith energy, the like transformation cycle work, the like the thing that a thing that I put in the chat that like came up a couple of times was like midwives of change, midwives of apocalypse, midwives of like magical midwives of shifting. And I just want to continue to bring that energy forward, because I think we're continually in a but I feel like every single person I talk to, it's like we're always in a time of transformation, and I think that's true. And regardless of what is happening, we're always consistently transforming, and so it's gonna bring that forward.
I had so many thoughts coming up of reinforce this. No, I want to reinforce that. No, I want to reinforce this. Everything that you all said. Also speaking for or as, to speak as these women and the ancestors. There's something about theater that allows you to enter into that. That's one thing. And the other thing is experimenting. I'm just so amazed by how you all felt and tried and kind of maybe found a thread that seemed to work, that you followed along until you came to, what you created, which I think is just, I mean, I don't know enough about contemporary theater to know, but it seemed to me really innovative and wonderful the way you did it. So, yeah. And I think it's that willingness to try and feel your way through all these possibilities to what really works.
Mm. Thank you all for joining or watching, and thanks to Ravenswing Magical Co-op for hosting, and for the Portland Book Festival Cover Together for instigating. And I will stop the recording, and we will see each other in the next incarnations of Rebels and Priestesses.
Yeah.